My favorite line from chapter 2 comes right at the end. The Volthorn, the military commander in this chapter, is also from the prologue. He was one of the guards of the king who failed to prevent the assassination that launched this whole story in the first place. And now, 7 years later, he just had a flashback thinking about that and thinking about his failure. And he tells himself, the past has passed. And this is a phrase that I use 3 or 4 times throughout the story by different characters. There's different characters that are all struggling to overcome the past, overcome past inadequacies, past failures, past mistakes. And so that phrase is used very strategically as one of my messages of the book, that the past is what it is. What are you going to do about the future? How did I create the AI artwork for General Volthorn? This was a somewhat tricky one. So I used the program Midjourney, and my initial prompt was Lizard Warrior General in bronze armor, medieval fantasy. And that was going in an okay direction. I didn't really like any of those, so I said, okay, make it more human-like and make it standing and in the outdoors. And that was getting a little closer, and I thought, well, I want him wearing a helmet because he's supposed to wear a helmet. So I said, reptilian warrior general with bronze armor and a helmet standing outdoors in a war camp, so adding some setting. And the helmet was not a good idea. Now he's just this weird Sauron-like figure. So, okay, scrap the helmet. Still trying to say war camp. It didn't really give me a war camp, so let's say tents. And it still wasn't giving me a war camp or tents. But I really liked this one in the upper left corner. It was still a little too not human-like enough, just not relatable enough. So I said, okay, vary some images based off of that. And it gave me some good options. And I really liked the fourth option it gave me. I thought that is my Volthorn. The problem is Volthorn is a Pyromancer, which in my world are magic users that store power in gems. And so he has gems all up and down his chest belts and other equipment. So I originally tried a couple ways to try and add that with AI. That did not work. So I thought, well, there's always Photoshop. So I got AI to generate just some fancy things with lots of jewels. And then I went into Photoshop and I used the clone tool to add those jewels to his belts. And that is how I created Volthorn. How did I come up with the name Volthorn? So back in high school, I was writing fantasy novels and I did not like coming up with names. I was horrible at it. And so one year, my sister was asking me, Jeremy, what do you want me to get you for Christmas? And I thought, I want you to come up with a list of fantasy names, like 20, 30, that I can use in my stories. And she was like, no problem. So a couple weeks later, Christmas morning, lo and behold, there's a list of excellent names. And the one that most caught my eye was a name suggested for a dwarf named Volthorn. It was one of her like 20 different names for dwarves. And I thought, Volthorn, I really like that name. And so 3 years later, I ended up using it for this general in my story. He's not a dwarf. He's a lizard-like being named a Korik. And by the way, it's Volthorn, not Volthorn, even though it looks like it could be pronounced either way. Chapter 2 of my book continues to develop an idea that's been hinted at in the prologue in the first chapter. And that's this idea of angels and demons and the fate of the soul after death. And the idea as it's presented in this chapter is when someone dies, their soul lingers until either an angel or a demon can claim them. But the problem is angels can only be out during the day and demons are out during the night. So in a battle, as is happening in chapter 2, as dusk is approaching, there are people designated to blow their horns and the battle stops because they don't want people to die after the sun has set, because then their souls are left to be claimed by the demons and taken to endless torment. And so you have this phenomenon that there's these international codes of war that you do not fight at night.